Right. Um, we are starting the second half of the inking. Inked quite a bit yesterday in terms of the Hell Zone. Got a lot done that I wasn't recording. So that's the first layer of ink. Need to do another layer of ink after this. I call it inking, but it's all acrylic. But the outlining. Anyway, was thinking about how to speak more about philosophy and not get too guided off of it. And I was thinking about ways to discuss my position more so that, and I thought about stepping back from metaphysical naturalism, which is kind of the scientific non-God grounding and backstepping into methodological naturalism, and then kind of stepping back and re-looping around back to methodological naturalism through a solipsistic state, which is kind of bringing in the unconscious and looking at the immanent properties of one's being as if everything that is immanent in one's universe, it's like exfoliated. It penetrates inwardly and outwardly, kind of like Corey Anton. His take is that there is a theos that's found by looking internally. And I would like to take that a step further, that there's kind of an infinite internal aspect that turns itself around, that there's a mirror image to the internal that comes out and weaves a fabric back out into the external, back out into objectivity. And so there's this travel of the soul, so to speak, that goes internally into the underconsciousness, the subconscious layer, where all sorts of dreams and imagination and everything can exist at that point, but then it re-extends back outward into objective reality. And then it's in this re-extension is where objective, supernatural, fantastical events can happen, can take place. And there's a form of alchemy that is associated with this process, I believe, that is, it would be like talking about magic, being able to perform magic spells, magic rituals. I say this because I have dabbled in that area, but I'm not certain what to say about it. Like I said, the whole idea is to loop from methodological naturalism all the way around back to methodological naturalism, where I'm regrounded in a state and I'm not superfluous in my communication about extracurricular happenings in the universe, where I leave that behind for the sake of philosophical conversation. But I can't get back to metaphysical naturalism with a complete denial of a Godhead for subconscious reasons, kind of that internal ecstatic state of the subconscious as it relates back to back to the individual. Um, Let me lay that line in right there. Had to adjust that by a centimeter or so. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about that type of thing a little bit more today, trying to bring up what it means to delve into the subconscious. Hop down, kitty. Hop on down. I think that might be better up there. Be doing, for the most part, the right-hand side of the painting today. But yeah, I was just trying to think about ways to describe diving into one's subconscious in a way to exfoliate imagery and symbolism and kind of religious artifacts back to the individual. And to the extent that we share this symbolism, it's in the public domain, but how we share it is what makes us different. Whether or not we grant our knowledges of ancient gods and godheads and symbols and processes in the subconscious, if we grant a meaning that resides in those symbols, that resides in our mind relative to those symbols, then we can manufacture associative meanings relative to those symbols. But this should all be done as a natural occurrence. But by natural, I don't mean naturalism. I mean natural in that it should stem from one's individual desires to quest, to find the meaning, the hermeneutic extended meaning of a symbol. Like why is that being painted, or why was that carved by that artisan? What cultural meaning could that have meant? What could be meant by that symbol? And I know Jung tries to tie back symbolism to the libido, which is interesting because I was just critiquing Eric Orwoll and saying that he's a young man and a lot of his philosophies seem to be relative to his, his drive towards sexuality and his drive towards violence, that these are part and parcel to the young man, that they're relative to the libido. And Carl Jung relates a lot of the subconscious to the libido, that the symbolism is about the libido. I'm not certain where to go with that. I'm not opposed to saying that, other than when the libido wanes and you're left with a more benign approach to one's living situation, then the symbology doesn't seem as if it has too much to do with the libido, but kind of bringing up a fiery self-image, kind of a self-appointed drive to just, I don't know, it's like trying to find a symbol that relates to the libido, but while being asexual, while being more asexual as opposed to being a gender-specific sort of sexuality, that symbols seem to echo in peculiar ways in our minds, but that life and animation, anime or anima being the Latin, are connected with one another. And so kind of an animation of symbology, that everything we do is a type of an art form, that how you spend your life is a type of an art form. What it is you're growing, what it is you're doing, what it is you're manifesting, how it is you're putting yourself out in the world is all a form of art. It's the art of the individual. It's how they're animating their life. And what to say about that, though? What to say about the idea of how to integrate the subconscious into your awaking, your ecstatic awake realm of being, and grant it some credence. Grant it credence as if it's something that's actually, if it hasn't occurred already, then it's brewing, and that it's awaiting the subjective mind to grant it credence, to grant it power, that as soon as symbolism comes into play and one is questing for symbols in their own subconscious, that there will be kind of a release of a manifold, that whatever paradigm you use as a personal dogma, like I would say, if you believe in a philosophy, then you're believing in a particular type of personal dogma. You've become rigid on that, so you believe that. So in the case of Anton, he believes that there's a theos that exists upon internal consideration, but there is no such thing as an afterlife in any objective spiritual, historic spiritual sense. But he adheres to that in such a strong fashion that it's a type of a dogma to grant the theos of a position in one's self-subjective consideration, that's how he's come to learn what God means, what theology means. Where you take somebody like Inmendham, a metaphysical naturalist, he wants to disclude all symbolic, meaningful connections, meanings of the theos entirely out of discourse. But then again, he also tries to take words that have meanings, inherited meanings and practical uses, and surmise that there's no real use of these words. But it would be interesting to pull apart the layers of a subconscious mind that has suffered personal physiological tragedy, that has suffered familial tragedy, that has an overall negative perception of how the universe is put together, what its meaning is, what its capacities are to believe in a totality of that meaning. It'd be interesting to pull apart that kind of psychology to see what resides inside, what could be echoed that still resides as a fear, because I believe that kind of personality thrives mostly off of fear status, a reaction to fear, a reaction to suffering as that which is to be feared. And so, I don't know, I guess I wanted to speak up a little bit about that. You know, because our personalities echo in our philosophies. And if you take kind of abandoning issues, like that Anton was adopted, he was abandoned by his parents, then perhaps a philosophy where God is not someplace objective to you that you get to go back to when you die is appropriate for his type of personality. That whatever the personal dogma is that one is bent on, whatever the litany of, you know, the paradigm that is a litany that is reiterated again and again, told to the individual by the individual about what is the case, what possibly can be the case, and where meaning resides. All of that seems as if it could be also ascertained by an analysis of where the individual comes from, how it is the individual is um, built as a young person growing. It's also interesting to say as a young person, because I wonder of the madnesses, the symbolic madnesses of women. I only tend philosophically to interact with men, but I know women have madnesses also, but I'm wondering how much more practical their madnesses are than men's madnesses. Whether or not men are more symbolic in general, more reactive to the image than women. It might also be a lack of reading any books on phenomenology by women. So perhaps there's academic papers that I should, you know, provided I was able to get access to from women on phenomenological occurrences, that I would be able to get those, read those, and formulate an opinion about women's relationship to symbols as it relates to their libido. Even a new idea is discussing women's libidos. It's normally partitioned off for men to have that kind of discussion. No, I've got big fish in the room listening in. So how to migrate topically from the subconscious, from getting into a solipsism subconscious state back to kind of a solipsistic naturalism is more what I'm talking about, where your solipsistic state, although you see yourself as a matrix, in a matrix, you accept the matrix and you ground the artifacts of the matrix in the science that's at hand. But you don't disclude people's theological percepts either. You continue to allow all argumentation as forms of argumentation, all perceptions as forms of perceptions, all personal dogmas that are expressed that you hear, you allow them in also. You don't exclude any expression as having no meaning to the individual. That all expressions take on a meaning that can be analyzed or looked at and discussed. Let me get that line in there. I really have to concentrate on my my exhaling when I'm doing these precision lines, so my pulse doesn't upset the line so much. Wow. So there's a guy that I know, an old friend from a decade ago, who caught me on a roof with a video camera where it was suspected objectively by people that were watching me that I was preparing to leap off of the roof, when in fact I was only on the roof to retrieve a canvas. But firemen were called to get me off of the roof, and I was just watching the firemen come, wondering where the fire was. Like, I don't see any smoke anywhere. I wonder where their fire is. And it turns out I was where the fire was, so to speak. And so this guy had a video camera, and he was recording me. And the fireman took me off of the roof. And anyway, so there's this recording that's going on about me now, a long interview about me. And the guy who's composing that really wanted this footage, but now the old friend that recorded it is kind of feeling like he's not getting anything out of the releasing of the footage, so he doesn't want to release it now, which is a bit of a bummer that he's holding on to that. And anyway, so that's what's going on personally with me. I'm a little bit wound up about that. So, yeah, once again, what to call it other than solipsistic naturalism, where you reduce your solipsistic claim without excluding other expressions, but including as your base root of the objective world an objectivism that doesn't deny scientific claims. So basically it's an acceptance of all claims, meaning it's not well, I shouldn't say an acceptance of all claims, but it's an apprehension of all claims, and then an acceptance of the science as still being the leading cause of the natural world. So if you take the Bill Nye and Ham argument that was there, I like to think that each side is expressing, an expression about how it is they view the ground of the world, the naturalism of the world, and that this ground should be listened to. In the solipsistic mind, they both take equal weight, but then if the shoe drops and you have to put your energy in one area opposed to the other, then to put it into the scientific ground. So that brings me back to something similar to methodological naturalism in my considerations. But what to say about subconscious or unconscious symbology and the power of the image and the symbol of media media plays a role in our lives and our considerations. What to say about that? Because it's so drastic that meaning comes from symbols that are around us. Meaning we're so drastically compelled and reactive to and apart from symbolism, or I should say to in response to symbolism. That everything that is a practice in your life, every item that you pick up, that you use, that you bring close to your body, that you infuse with your body, is also a symbol in its epistemological ground. And that symbol in kind of just a logical space, just looking at your environment as an epistemological, logical space, like a logical positivist would look at just the facts of the world, that here we are with just these symbolic facts that make up our world, that every symbol is just another part of the puzzle of facts that make up our world. This is to step away, step inward a little bit from the ontology, using a phenomenology to describe yourself as more rooted in epistemology than ontology for certain mental considerations, for certain mental perceptions. So it's weird to talk about what is, especially if one does not have in their is description anything that is radically beyond their comprehension. They want to grant everything at that point just to the imagination, as opposed to saying that there's some manifestation that occurs in the objective realm that is simply not coerced and secured by analysis of science, by current practical models that are reading light and sound, or I shouldn't say models that read it, but technologies that read it, or that the technology could read objective occurrences that are supernatural, super radical, but that the apparatus to do the reading is not present during the times that these occur. I mean, what happens if you had to have a technology to read an orb? You know, well, I don't know, there's plenty of people that have caught orbs on cameras, and those are available. Those are available. And, you know, there's scrutiny about the validity of what is captured, but nevertheless, there's still capture going on there, meaning there's claims of capture going on there. I saw one film of an orb from just a layman, just a person that was recording a basement, and an orb came by, and they have it on film, and they were supposedly only using night vision. They were hanging out. They were ghost hunters looking for such a thing, and so when they found it, of course, they were overly preoccupied by the fact that they found it. But I don't know. I'm not certain what to say, but I do like the idea of solipsistic-naturalism as a default to science, as me trying to get back to methodological naturalism as close as I can. But there's really no method to what it is I I speak about. No method to my madness that isn't anything that's not, would be considered anything other than magical. So that's where, butting up against other philosophies, is limited. There's not much that can be done or said. It's more or less me trying to, state that these occurrences are occurring in the natural world as opposed to in the imagination. But I do have to admit that there was a certain ricochet of symbolism where the subconscious seemed to, where the consciousness kind of melted away and it left the unconscious awake. And the occurrences that were happening were so intense that meaning started to derive out of just static states. I shouldn't say static states, but out of anything that disrupted a static state, any click or bump, any single kinetic thing was accented like a flam on a snare drum to stand out, to take on a focal point where meaning was overly derived. I was listening to somebody that believes in reincarnation yesterday, and they're like, okay, I don't care whether or not you believe it or not. I just, want your respect to listen to what it is I have to say about it. And I thought to myself, listening to her, that my claims are not too far off of what her claims are in terms of people that are in a rational, metaphysical, naturalistic ground. They can't comprehend what it is I'm saying with any sense of believability. Hers, she related it to the past, that I have had past lives, and that she forecasts having a future life, and that the souls are mixed, but come into contact with each other in future or past lives. But I don't personally hold an opinion about that. I can think about it. I integrate the expression into my person and take it seriously. I do take it seriously, but I don't know to what extent, you're supposed to view an afterlife as an infinity in heaven or an infinity in hell in some sort of binary sense, and then change that over to more of a Hindu perspective of reincarnation and karma. There just seems as if there's a lattice that ties religious possibilities together as we've heard them before, and I feel like I'm coming through my expression and my experience differently than people normally have. Even people with religious histories are really able to comprehend. I mean, I shouldn't say that, because there's plenty of people that claim UFO sightings, abduction interaction with extracurricular. I mean, I remember seeing this video of a guy that was with 4 other guys that saw a flying saucer up close, landed, and this was years later, and the guy was practically in tears, wishing that he had never seen the thing, because just by seeing it, it had distorted his whole approach to life and theology, and he was just rather upset by seeing what he saw. And that's the same way with me, is, you know, I can't hide it any longer. As a matter of fact, I want to wear it on my sleeve, so I put it out there, and I haven't been ostracized, and I was happy that I hadn't been ostracized by the public since I came up with it. But how to integrate it into a philosophy is asking people, well, start accepting the testimony of people that have super radical happenings that they're claiming, and there has to be some credence to that. Immediately I think of inmendham bringing up, well, crop circles. Guys have admitted crop circles, but then if you actually start looking up crop circles, provided you believe the photographs are real and they're not photoshopped, you'll see some geometric patternings that are, I believe, too outstanding for individuals to have knocked down in a night, and claims that these are by the SETI satellites, not more than like 50 miles from the SETI satellites that are sending off the radio waves just outwardly into the cosmos. That kind of this quote-unquote alien response is to lay down these crop circles. So, and we talked about a coincidence, you know, oh, wouldn't it be coincidental that somebody would admit to making crop circles and at the same time have aliens do that, when in fact there might have been claims of crop circles that occurred, and then people trying to reenact that, so that they go out and they reenact a crop circle, and then they claim that they did it, and they would be correct because they did do it. But it doesn't mean that there weren't occurrences of crop circles that occurred prior to the persons creating them. But I don't like to bring the conversation to anything that I'm not personally connected to, and I'm not personally connected to crop circles. But I listen to it, just like I was mentioning before. I have to take in all claims, you know, which can make me overtly gullible, but I have to take them in and digest them mentally as having some form of credence. Simply because I've had a fissure in my objective reality, and because of that, I have to be open to the idea of other people having sensations or having real objective fissures in their reality, or I should say our reality. And this is why I think that people that haven't had it, I like the idea of referring to them as muggles. Muggles are not able to, or have not had the pleasure of seeing a fissure in their reality. So, and what am I left to do with it other than partake in abstract ceremonies, which I have ceremonies I can partake in that are self-invented, that seem to take on some particular type of meaning, And, I was discussing that with Inmendham. Why not do something? Why not start practicing something that is seemingly absurd from all sound, rational vantage points to see what happens to the subjective, to see, at least as a starting point, not to say that there's going to be a fissure in your objective reality, but to say that there's going to be a mix of symbolisms and mental processes that occur in your subjective, in the subjective realm, that will affect your consciousness. It'll start out as an unconscious or subconscious happening, and then it should manifest into something else. But God forbid somebody that's a rationalist claim, oh, I started partaking in this irrational practice. So just painting is enough, I suppose. It's grounded enough, but it also brings up symbology that can start echoing in the subconscious, and no one will think that you're a Fruit Loop for doing it. So at least the practice of painting is one type of practice that has a bit of absurdity to it. You can just appeal to aesthetics, but because it's an accepted normative behavior, you don't have to worry about people thinking that you're a half-wit or a loon tune for partaking in it, even though what it is I'm discussing is finding something that's heartfelt, something that's really heartfelt, that is nagging at you or is irritating you internally, that you want to investigate by doing something that comes to mind that seems absolutely ridiculous, and doing it anyway, following through on the process, just to satisfy that subconscious urge that brewed its head. How we doing, Big Fish? Looks like I had some guests that entered and left. At least a couple. Anyway, so that's a monologue. I shouldn't linger on it too much more, but at least it came out while I was painting, so I fulfilled the philosophy in painting video. It's a good starting ground to ramble, and I'll let my viewers comment as they see fit or ignore me as they see fit. Just take in what I've said, and so be it. So be it. But if you want reading material, you can get the first, I don't know, 100 and something pages of Carl Jung's Red Book. Skip over the introduction notes, the preface, and just dive right into the Red Book reading. I think you'll see it's got some absurd claims of his own dilapidated consciousness, his own wrestling with symbols and symbolism, and what that means to him. He brought up a man with a bull's head holding 4 keys, holding one key like he's opening a door, and I realized I have a bull head down at the bottom of this painting. just the idea of the Minotaur in some capacity plays a subconscious role, but what role does it play? Really, what does the Minotaur mean? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to, the idea that as a culture we eat, compared to in Hindu culture, we eat a lot of beef, where they do not, where the Egyptians have, even down here, a cow head god, Hathor. And Hathor is depicted in a few different ways, but one of the main ways is with a cow's head. What does it mean? What does that symbolism mean? Why would an artist from ancient days paint that? Why would there be the idea of a maze and a minotaur in the center? Like, where did that mythology come from, and how is it embedded in our psyches? Why is it embedded in our psyches? Would it become manifest? I mean, why did Native Americans run around with buffalo heads on, creating their own dance to something like a minotaur? Why is it, cross-pollinated across cultures and across times, across different tribes? Why does it resurface as an idea? I mean, of all things imaginable, a man with a cow's head is not a complicated idea. It's somewhat of a complicated idea. You know, in one case you might say, oh, it's a prayer to hope that more buffalo come, but in another case it might be a substratum of our collective unconscious, if you want to accept such a thing as a intersubjective collective unconscious that manifests itself in a peculiar, very particular fashion. Anyway, not certain what else to say on the topic, because I'm moving a little bit tangentially and from topic to topic. Yeah, what role does the subconscious play? What role does lucid dreaming play? Or abstract awake thought play? And where can I, through established philosophical, within the established philosophical canon or psychological canon, can I place myself as a specific type of individual besides just the psychiatric model. There must be some relationship from the psychological, spiritual, psychiatric modes that are interconnected. Okay, well, I think I'm done with this video.